Good morning. This morning I'm going to comment on recent reports around the Keystone XL pipeline project and then provide an update on the vaccination program for COVID-19 here in Alberta. We are deeply concerned with reports coming from Washington that President-elect Biden may abrogate the presidential permit for the Keystone XL border crossing later this week. That would be, in our view, a serious economic and strategic error that would set back Canada-U.S. relations with the United States' most important trading partner and strategic ally, Canada. By far, the largest exports of Canada to the United States are represented by Alberta crude oil exports. Canada, on an average year, exports some $100 billion worth of energy through primarily Alberta crude to the United States through border crossing pipelines every year. That helps to fuel the American economy. And Keystone XL simply represents a expansion of that decades-old energy partnership and cooperation between our two countries. Keystone XL represents the opportunity to create over 40,000 jobs in the United States, to add over $3 billion to the gross domestic product, just in terms of its construction. But more importantly, represents energy security for a country in the United States that has sacrificed so much to maintain energy security as a key part of its strategic interests and its prosperity. Here's this very simple choice. Either the United States has access to environmentally responsible energy produced in a close democratic ally, or it becomes more dependent on foreign oil imports from Venezuela and other OPEC dictatorships in the future. Canada has made enormous progress in terms of improving the environmental performance of our energy production, reducing significantly the carbon intensity of a barrel of bitumen, for example, that is produced, to the point where heavy oil produced in this province has, on average, a lower carbon intensity than heavy oil produced elsewhere in North America and around the world. And Alberta and Canada are increasingly committed to doing better with huge investments in technology like carbon capture, utilization and storage, and other technologies to continue improving our environmental performance. But most importantly, this is, as I say, the largest, by far, the largest export product of Canada to the United States. And Canada is the United States' most important trading partner. The strategic relationship between these two countries is essential for both of them, for North America, and indeed for global peace and security. We cannot imagine a circumstance where the United States would effectively choose to benefit OPEC dictatorships that have spread conflict and undermine global security, rather than partnering with its close democratic ally, Canada. Now, the Government of Canada has said that the top priority in the bilateral relationship is Keystone XL. And I understand that Prime Minister Trudeau expressed that to President-elect Biden on their call on November 9th of last year, in which the statement was issued indicating that they had agreed to engage on issues such as energy environment, including Keystone XL. It is our fervent hope that the incoming U.S. administration will keep that commitment to engage with the top ally of the United States, with Canada. Because in the lead up to the lead up to the swearing in of the new president, understandably, the transition team has decided not to have formal communications with foreign governments given events over recent years. But I believe that as the most important ally and trading partner of the United States, that the United States government owes Canada the respect to at least sit down with us and talk about this vital project in the broader context of our shared challenge in addressing climate change, continental energy security, and broader issues. Surely the relationship between Canada and the United States is worth at least having that discussion. Major U.S. unions are calling, I know, on President-elect Biden and his transition team to do just that, to keep the commitment with Prime Minister Trudeau to engage on these critically important issues and not rush to judgment, to sit down and review the many facts that have changed since Keystone XL was first proposed over a decade ago. The dramatically improved environmental performance here in Canada, the fact that TC Energy, the operator of the pipeline, has committed to net zero carbon emissions related to the operation of the pipeline, the contracting of large union contractors with the support of the largest private sector unions in the United States, the negotiation of an agreement with a consortium of both American and Canadian First Nations, potentially to participate in an ownership stake in this project, and so much more. One of the reasons we are deeply concerned about this is that it would, if a presidential order is signed abrogating the border crossing permit, it would affect a pipeline that already crosses the border. I'm not sure that people involved in this decision in Washington are fully aware that the border crossing was a section of the pipeline was built last year as part of construction efforts. If a precedent is created where the United States government can unilaterally stop border crossings of pipelines that already exist, then this could be applied to the many other pipelines that provide Canadian energy to U.S. consumers. We know that the same political forces trying to disrupt and stop the construction of Keystone XL are involved in trying to stop the expansion of Line 3, as well as Line 5 to the upper Midwest, and many other vital projects that are the backbone of continental energy independence. And so if this precedent is allowed to go forward, I believe those same political forces will then seek to get a presidential order retroactively to remove the permission for border crossing of other critical energy infrastructure. And for Canadians here, we are talking about $100 billion in exports, more than twice as much the value of exports of Canadian automobiles and auto parts to the United States. So this is a matter that touches on Canada's vital economic interests, and I'm therefore confident that the Government of Canada will reflect in the next couple of days the kind of priority it has placed on the construction of Keystone XL in saying that it is at the top of the bilateral agenda. All we ask at this point is that President-elect Biden show Canada the respect to actually sit down and hear our case about how we can be partners in prosperity, partners in combating climate change, partners in energy security. With that, I'd like to make some comments about the status of the vaccine program here in Alberta. First, some good news. Yesterday, we completed the first dose of vaccination at all of Alberta's 357 long-term care and designated supported living facilities. This is a tremendous milestone, and I believe makes Alberta the first province in the country to complete the first dose vaccine rollout for this important and highly vulnerable population. Thank you so much to the staff and frontline workers at Alberta Health Services for making this happen. Now, the not so good news. By the end of today or early tomorrow, Albertans will have no more vaccine doses in storage to administer as first doses to Albertans. Alberta Health Services has administered nearly 90,000 doses since vaccinations began on December 15th. Over the past few weeks, Alberta has consistently ranked at or near the top of provinces for vaccine deployment. This is the standard of excellence that Albertans both expect and demand. It's great that we've been able to vaccinate so many, but we have quite simply run out of supply. Yes, we'll get more vaccine in the coming weeks and some more doses this week, but we need to make adjustments today to accommodate this lack of supply. Even with a new shipment of Pfizer vaccines expected later this week, we won't have enough vaccine to continue with new first dose appointments. That is why first dose appointments will not be scheduled until further notice. By pausing first appointments, we can ensure enough vaccine is allocated for committed second dose appointments. Second dose appointments will not be cancelled, and we believe that we can administer second doses to all those who need them within the recommended time frame. Our ability to get needed vaccine in the arms of Albertans is limited by the number of vaccine doses obtained by the Government of Canada. Three critical components exist for our continued success in this vaccine program. First, we must have the staff and resources and the resource capacity, I should say, to deliver the vaccine, and clearly we have that in place. Not only are we in a position to be able to deliver over 50,000 doses per week, but by expanding the vaccination program to include pharmacists, we expect to reach even higher weekly goals of about 200,000 vaccines per week by the end of March. Second, we need Albertans to sign up and get that shot. That was clear last week when thousands of vaccination slots were set aside for healthcare workers, but they had stayed unbooked until a special appeal went out and appointments were made over this past weekend. But it's the third component that we really have no control over, and that, of course, is vaccine supply. The shipments we've received do not match the pace at which we're able to vaccinate Albertans. I'm deeply disappointed at the situation that we are now facing. The news on January 15th that Pfizer shipments would be cut by 20 to 80% over coming weeks only adds to that frustration, and we've had to change our vaccination plan accordingly. It's doubly disappointing that Pfizer has since been able to readjust its delivery schedule so that European countries will not be significantly affected, but Canada's supply will be held back. We'll have to delay the number of planned vaccines for eligible healthcare workers and the vaccination to other Albertans in the broader Phase 1 populations. This means that the planned vaccination of First Nations and Métis individuals and over the age of 65 and seniors broadly over the age of 75 has been put on hold. This week, new shipments of Pfizer vaccines will not be enough to match our pace of inoculation, and so appointments, regrettably, will have to be rescheduled, and fewer Albertans will be vaccinated in the short term. We now have the capacity, as I've said, to deliver over 50,000 doses a week, but we simply do not have the supply to match. So despite this setback, we remain in a position to ramp up and get back to record vaccination numbers once sufficient doses are delivered. And I know that seems to be a bit of a moving target, but that is where we stand today. And with that, I'm happy to answer your questions on these or other issues.
Just a reminder, as we have many people in the queue today, to limit yourself to one question and to keep your questions brief. With that, operator, can you please put through the first question?
Chris Varto with the Calgary Herald. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, Premier. If the Keystone XL project has its permit pulled this week, does that effectively spell the end to Keystone XL? That's my first question. And separately, what specific options does Alberta have to recoup any or all of its investment?
On the first question, if that happens, we'll sit down with the Government of Canada and with TC Energy to assess our next steps. On the second question, we believe that we would have very strong arguments for legal recourse for damages incurred. This is, I believe, without precedent for an American administration retroactively to seek to cancel a piece of infrastructure, this border crossing, that already exists. Obviously, costs have been incurred, and if the project is effectively killed by a presidential veto of this nature, a retroactive veto, we believe that under the Canada-United States-Mexico trade agreement and other international instruments that there would be a solid legal basis to at the very least seek damages. So we have retained legal counsel both here in Canada and the United States to advise us through the entire process, including on our potential legal standing to seek compensation and should there be this kind of retroactive veto. So on both of those, we'll have to wait and see. But our main focus right now, Chris, is working with the Government of Canada to ask the President-elect to respect the undertaking that we understand he gave on November 9th to Prime Minister Trudeau to engage with us on Keystone XL and related issues. In other words, give Canada the chance to make the case for how this is clearly in the economic, security, and environmental interests of both countries.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next question?
Next is Emma Graney with the Globe and Mail. Go ahead, Emma.
Yeah, g'day. Premier, just further to Chris's question, so was there legal resource actually signed into the contract with TC Energy that Alberta would in fact be able to recoup taxpayer money in the case of the permit being cancelled? And that just to clarify Chris's question there. And also, my question would be, RBC says that the most likely next step here for TC Energy, and in fact the best option for the company and the shareholders, is walking away from KXL altogether. What's your reaction to that? And would the province consider ponying up more money were TC Energy to reapply for the permit?
Well, there's a lot of questions. First of all, the contract signed with TC Energy is about the construction of the project. We are in a partnership, not an adversarial relationship with TC Energy. We think we signed a contract that minimized risks for the government of Alberta. Let me be clear, had we not entered into a partnership with TC Energy, no construction would have been undertaken. Construction that has helped to create thousands of good paying jobs this year, that created facts on the ground and demonstrated that we are not going to be passively accepting the campaign to landlock Canadian energy. As I've said, the same political forces seeking to kill this project are trying to do the same with respect to Line 3, Line 5, and other projects. We need to see Keystone XL in the context of a broader effort to block Canada's largest export product to the United States that represents $100 billion of value a year for the Canadian economy. So this is about more than just Keystone XL. This is about the Canada-US relationship. This is about tens of thousands of jobs here. This is about billions of dollars of revenue for governments to pay for things like healthcare. This is about, from the American side, whether they will have reliable access to energy in a country that is a world leader on the environment. Canada is ranked third in the world on the in environmental, social, and governance metrics amongst major energy producers after Denmark and Norway. Either the United States, with this administration's commendable concern about the environment, can draw on that resource, or for years and decades to come, it will have to depend on the heavy crude from Venezuela and more oil imports from OPEC. So that's the case that we are making. We hope that, given the importance of the Canada-US relationship, that the President-elect will at least agree, as apparently he did in that initial call with Prime Minister Trudeau, to engage on the issue and not to make a rash decision. In terms of whether we would proceed without TC Energy, the government of Alberta is not a pipeline company, and we would need a partner, obviously, a project proponent, a pipeline company to lead construction. We are not interested in taking the same position on Keystone XL that the Government of Canada did with respect to Trans Mountain, which was outright purchase of the project, particularly if there is a retroactive veto for the border crossing. We made what I believe was a prudent investment to move the project forward, to create facts on the ground, and that limits exposure to taxpayers. And if we need to pursue legal defense, I should say legal action, to defend our interests, we will do so.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next question?
Next is Bill Fortier with CTV News. Go ahead, Bill.
Hi, good morning, Premier. I'm curious if you are in a position where you have to rely on Ottawa to make this argument to the Biden administration, or if the province of Alberta can either directly reach out and connect with the Biden administration or connect with some of the individual states that will be involved in this so they can make their argument to the Biden administration.
Well, it's both. We appointed a senior representative for Alberta to Washington, former MP James Rajat, who has been burning up the phone lines for the past several weeks, talking to top Democrats in Washington and state governments. I've been doing the same. So yes, Alberta has had a direct effort on its own to reach out. I've been speaking to the leadership of the major U.S. construction trade unions, for example, and so we continue to do our best to convey the messages directly. But ultimately, this is about the Canada-U.S. relationship, and that is why we also need a clear message to be sent from Ottawa that a decision to retroactively kill a critical infrastructure project that binds the two countries together, that strengthens continental energy protection for two countries that have similar goals with respect to climate change and the environment, that would not be acceptable, that would damage the Canada-U.S. relationship. And I believe the Government of Canada has done that, which is why the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Canada said just before Christmas that the construction of Keystone XL was, quotes, at the top of the bilateral agenda with the incoming Biden administration. I want to thank our Canadian ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, who has been very clear about this. But I do believe it's important that in the next 48 hours that Prime Minister Trudeau reach out directly to the incoming administration to reiterate the message he sent on November the 9th, that this is at the top of the agenda, that this is central to the bilateral relationship. So we need both Canada and Alberta communicating those messages. And I want you to know that we do have a lot of, I think, influential allies in Washington on this. The large construction unions who would benefit from this project, whose workers would benefit from it, all of them endorsed President-elect Biden during his primary campaign, and they certainly supported his general election campaign. And I know that they are reaching out in a very blunt way right now to the transition team to remind the transition team that it committed to respect the unions and to at least listen to them on any decisions that could affect union jobs. We've also engaged as a government influential Democrats to represent us as government relations consultants, and they have been part of the broader effort.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next question?
Next is Rafi Boujakenian with CBC. Go ahead, Rafi.
Hi, Premier. Recently, you suggested that the Alberta government might have to procure its own vaccines for COVID-19, and I guess I'm wondering how you would proceed to do that, especially in the light of the news that Pfizer itself is experiencing delays.
Well, to be clear, Rafi, we would not have access to Pfizer. The Government of Canada has signed contracts, I believe, with 8 pharmaceutical producers to have exclusive rights for the Canadian market. We respect that, and we would not seek to challenge that. But there are many other producers with whom the Government of Canada has not entered into purchase agreements. And I've simply asked that our experts investigate whether we could enter into our own bilateral purchase agreements as a government of Alberta with producers that don't have exclusive agreements with the Government of Canada. So that's where we're at. Pfizer clearly has a exclusive selling agreement for the Canadian market with the federal government. I will just say on this front that I am disturbed by reports that apparently Pfizer has indicated to European governments that their orders, that their supply schedule will be maintained and respected, notwithstanding the maintenance they're doing on their production facility in Belgium. But apparently Canada has not received the same assurance. And it is concerning to me that we have many peer countries around the world, the United States, the UK, Israel, amongst others, that are receiving substantially more supply. And that is why I've said that if there are producers that ultimately go through successful phase 3 trials and ultimately get approval from Health Canada, and those producers do not have purchasing agreements with the Government of Canada, perhaps there's an opportunity for us to acquire supplementary supply. But right now, that's, I would say, somewhere off in the distance, because none of those other companies have yet gone through phase 3 trials, nor have they applied for or obtained approval by Health Canada.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next question?
Next is Tom Vernon with Global News. Go ahead, Tom.
Hi, Premier. Thanks for taking my question. On the Keystone XL file, $6 billion in loan guarantees were to take effect this year. Has TC Energy accessed any of that? Is the potential amount of money that the Alberta government is on the hook for gone up from the original 1.5?
No, that would be the original $1 billion for the equity portion in the first year. And the answer, Tom, to your question is that for January and February, we're sort of getting into mid-late January here, we understand that $150 to $200 million in construction costs have been planned, which would be supported in part by the loan guarantee. So we think there might be an additional $150 to $200 million in exposure, but that would be offset by, if the project ultimately ends, we hope that does not happen, but if the project ends, there would be assets that could be sold, like, for example, enormous quantities of pipes, and so that would offset, we believe, almost exactly the construction costs supported in 2021 by the loan guarantee. The bottom line is, right now, our estimate of our exposure is slightly over $1 billion, and I want to put that in context. We're talking about a project here that, if completed, we believe over the next decade would generate $30 billion in value for Alberta, and create enormous jobs, create a long-term future for the Canadian oil sands, create billions in government revenue. And again, to put that in perspective, the previous government signed contracts of $3.8 billion only to move 120,000 barrels per day over only 3 years through crude by rail shipments, but in fact, because of the collapse in energy prices, wouldn't have moved anything, so anything meaningful. So just to put, and the federal government, as you know, put it at risk $7 billion to buy the Trans Mountain pipeline, and there will be further costs incurred there. So here's the reality. Because of this effort to landlock Canadian energy, governments of all kinds have had to step in to help to de-risk energy infrastructure, without which this energy infrastructure would not be built. And I think in that context, this was a prudent investment that limits the taxpayers' exposure.
We have time for 3 more questions. Operator, would you please put through the next question?
Next is Rick Bell with the Calgary Sun. Go ahead, Rick.
Good morning, Premier. Just 2 things very quickly, because this economics talk is a bit highfalutin for me this morning on a Monday morning, so I'm just going to be more blunt. If the project ends, how much could this end up costing Alberta taxpayers, A, and B, how do you rate the federal government's efforts on this file, since you've always said that you are being very diplomatic with the Trudeau government because they are helpful on files such as Keystone? So how do you rate their performance? So those are the 2 things. How much are we on the possibly on the hook for in real dollars, and how do you rate the federal government's performance on this file?
On the first question, Rick, the answer is about $1 billion. We'll have to do the accounting. We hope it doesn't come to that, and we hope that President-elect Biden will show respect for Canada and will sit down and at the very least talk to this country about the issues. That would be the direct cost on this project. But Rick, I have to flag that if a precedent is created where a U.S. administration can retroactively veto a pipeline that already exists, it crosses the border already, then I truly believe we are facing much bigger challenge that could cost us billions and tens of billions more in the future. Because the same folks trying to shut down Line 5 that delivers 650,000 barrels of Alberta crude to the upper Midwest and that fuels most of the Ontario economy, the same folks trying to kill the Line 3 replacement, again to the upper Midwest, the same folks trying to kill other Canada-US pipelines will be emboldened by this if it is a precedent. And if those projects are jeopardized, the costs will be in the tens of billions of dollars to the Alberta economy and billions in revenue. So I say the immediate cost on this particular project in the range of $1 billion. But what we're trying to do here is to defend what is in large measure the lifeblood of our economy and the largest part of the Canadian economy. On the second question, I was very happy before Christmas that the federal Foreign Affairs Minister said that Keystone XL was, quotes, at the top of the Canada-US agenda with the incoming Biden administration. I was happy that the Prime Minister raised this as one of his top issues with President-elect Biden when they spoke on November the 9th. I've been very happy with the strong advocacy by Canada's ambassador to the United States. So we appreciate that support, but now is the critical hour. We are at the 11th hour, and we need, if this really is a top priority, as it should be, then we need the Government of Canada to stand up for Canadian workers, for Canadian jobs, for the Canada-US relationship right now, today and tomorrow.
Thank you. Operator, will you please put through the next question?
Next is Andrew Lawton with True North. Go ahead, Andrew.
Good morning, Premier. Turning to COVID-19, in Ontario and Quebec, where they have very strict lockdowns, we are seeing a continued rise in cases, where contrasting with Alberta, which had a much less severe set of restrictions, we saw a peak in December that seems to be, we certainly hope, continuing to be on the decline. And I'm curious if you can comment as to why you think that is and what there might be in Alberta's approach that could be replicated in other parts of the country.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, you know, you can have all the rules in the world, but it doesn't matter if people don't comply with them. And our take on this is that if you put people on sort of indefinite lockdown, there is only so much public patience to respect and comply with rules like that. One of the reasons we have looked at restrictions as a last and limited resort is to maintain public compliance with those guidelines and restrictions, so that people buy into them, and hopefully they can be shorter in duration, and therefore less destructive in terms of their social and economic impact. So I know we've been heavily criticized by some for looking at restrictions not as a first choice, but as a last and limited resort. But I think it has served Alberta reasonably well, the approach that we have taken. We began relaxation of the current set of restrictions. In fact, we will begin that this week with some activities, and we will continue to take a careful approach gradually to relaxing those restrictions as long as we continue to see the numbers go in the right direction. I'll remind you, I know there are a lot of Albertans who are understandably frustrated with the restrictions that we currently have. And they often ask me, you know, what's the goal here? Let me restate that goal. The goal is to protect lives and livelihoods. More specifically, in Alberta, the goal is to control viral spread so that it does not overwhelm the healthcare system while minimizing the damage of restrictions on our broader social and economic health. That has always been, our goal has never been to chase after zero. Our goal has never been to eliminate risk, because we believe that's a fool's errand in this context, but rather to manage risk. And I want to thank Albertans. There was some poll a couple of weeks ago that said Albertans had the highest level of not socializing over the Christmas holidays. So that's the kind of buy-in that I'm talking about. I was ridiculed by political opponents in the fall for talking about the importance of personal and collective responsibility. This is exactly what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, you can have all the restrictions in the world, try to shut things down, but if people don't respect them, it doesn't matter. And so I want to thank Albertans for respecting the public health guidance as we continue to see the numbers go in the right direction right now.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the final question?
Final question is Tiffany Roquette with CBC Français. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Bonjour, Monsieur Kenney. Combien d'argent les Albertans vont-ils perdre avec Keystone XL si le pipeline ne va pas de l'avant? Et comment vous justifiez d'avoir fait un pari si risqué alors que Joe Biden avait dit plusieurs fois son opposition à ce pipeline?
Quant à l'investissement de l'Alberta dans l'oléoduc, ça représente un risque actuel d'environ $1 milliard. Mais si le projet est annulé, ça représentera un coût d'environ $30 milliards à l'économie albertaine d'ici 2030. Alors, le coût est beaucoup plus large au plan économique pour les Albertains. En ce qui concerne la position de M. Biden, le Premier ministre Trudeau a soulevé l'oléoduc Keystone XL dans le rappel de 9 novembre, de 9 novembre, et la déclaration à la suite était que M. Biden a fait un engagement à parler au Canada, à s'engager au Canada sur les questions de l'énergie, de l'environnement, y compris l'oléoduc Keystone XL. Et tout ce que nous demandons, exigeons, est que le prochain président des États-Unis respecte le Canada comme le partenaire le plus important, stratégique, de commerce pour les États-Unis, d'avoir au moins une discussion, les pourparlers, parce que, comme M. Biden, la première fois que M. Biden a entendu dire de l'oléoduc Keystone XL, ça fait 10 ans quand le projet a été proposé la première fois. Mais il y a eu énormément de changements dans le projet depuis ce moment-là. Et je crois que, comme le meilleur partenaire des États-Unis, je crois que le président des États-Unis doit démontrer un peu de respect envers le Canada, au moins de discuter la situation dans le contexte de nos efforts partagés à combattre le changement climatique. Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That concludes today's press conference.